So my rant is against Fall Out Boy. I fucking hate Fall Out Boy, and I want them to just go away forever and never have one of their shitty-ass songs be the one song that they play over and over again.
Some legends are told, some turn to dust or to gold, but you will remember me for centuries. Just one mistake is all it will take. We'll go down in history. Remember me for centuries.
Welcome to the 3% Podcast. This is Chad Post from Open Letter Books. I'm here with Tom Roberts from Albertine and New Directions. And we have a special guest, Patrick Smith, who is a writer and critic living in Vermont. He writes for the 3% Podcast, or 3% Podcast. He writes for the 3% website and Full Stop and a number of other places as well. I think you probably just, oh no, you didn't send me an email explaining all of the places that you publish for. But welcome to the 3% Podcast, Patrick.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for coming on to talk to us. And today's podcast is going to be a special one in which we do our quasi-regular book club, and we're going to talk about The Laughing Monsters by Denis Johnson. But before that, because this came up a few times, Tom, did you want to talk quickly about the French? A few episodes ago, yes, podcast number 85, Tom, you ranted about various titles in French of translations, and I guess there was some particular error that someone pointed out to you.
This is an email from Jill Alessandra McCoy, who is a part of the what is it called? The European Society of Authors and Translators. Mm-hmm. And I'm guessing she translates from the French, perhaps other languages. Anyway, yes, I would like to begin with pointing out, I'm pretty sure this was a rave. I was bemused by these translations. I don't think I was ranting. But anyway. But yeah, she wrote in, and I'm just going to read her email because it's much easier than trying to sum up. And it's short enough and blah, blah, blah. Plus, she tells us how awesome we are. So that's always great. So it says, for a while now, I've been a regular 3% podcast listener. I like it a lot. It spices up my metro commutes and reminds me of what's going on at home, literature and translation-wise. So first and foremost, thanks and congratulations on an excellent job. Naturally, I'm a year perked at the end of the podcast number 85 during your rant, actually a rave, Tom, about the translated titles you've come across at Albertine. I fear the French publishers are not quite as daft as you may think. You've missed part of all the meanings in the French. Indulge me a moment as I play the snobby Paris-dwelling American who corrects people's French. Who are these people? That's really obnoxious. Anyway, To Kill a Mockingbird.
I know Jill. You know Jill.
I've met her, but I'm having a hard time placing her. But, she's very nice in her email. So she seems like somebody I would like. To Kill a Mockingbird, and which is Ne tirez pas sur l'oiseau moqueur, and tirer sur in French means to shoot someone or shoot something. So tirer sur l'oiseau moqueur, To Kill a Mockingbird, granted the introduction of the negative is debatable. Apparently there have been 3 different French titles. This one, I don't remember this from the email. Quand meurt le rossignol, when the nightingale dies, which they just chose the wrong bird altogether. And Alouette, je te plumerai, which is from a song. Have you ever heard this song?
Yeah.
Alouette, je te...
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we've all heard that song.
That translates as Lark, I'll Pluck You.
Which is the funniest of the English translations, I think. Lark, I'll Pluck You.
It's funny, but
that's like one letter away from like a dirty limerick.
It's also, that's like a playful children's song.
Yeah.
It's really not appropriate for To Kill a Mockingbird. And then she goes on, what's funny about this is that it's 3 different birds. So obviously the French translation of this title has not been a straightforward matter. I suppose the most literal translation would actually have to be tirer sur l'oiseau moqueur, which would preserve the infinitive to kill in Harper Lee's original. And then Nobody Move, the Denis Johnson, appropriately enough, sort of neo-noir book from, I don't even remember what year that was, 2006 or 7, which is translated as Pearson bouge. And she says, so the direct translation of Nobody Move in French would be Ne personne ne bouge. Personne, like rien et jamais, are words that require the ne in French when used in sentences and mean respectively nobody, nothing, and never. The ne has been removed from the title surely to make it sound more colloquial or spoken, but it doesn't change the meaning at all. The ne is actually very often removed in spoken French. If I were a cop exiting my car at a bloody crime scene, which is not at all the plot of this book.
Which I think she's just throwing that in there, like as if she were a cop exiting at a bloody crime
fantasy
scene. Yeah, like some kind of momentary wish fulfillment.
She says, I would definitely yell out personne bouge, leaving the ne behind in my grammar book. And then she says, because the last one we talked about was how Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, the Le Carré book was just translated as Le Taupe, the spy, or the mole. And she says, for that, all I can say is the attempted translation in French would probably sound ridiculous, and the publisher just figured the book would sell more copies if it was just called The Spy. So I wrote her back and said that we were going to mention this on the podcast this week, and I asked her, what did I ask exactly? If she had come across any interesting translations herself. She starts by saying that, where is it here?
The main one is the Desperation.
Yes.
Yeah.
So she attended an exhibit of Oulipo at one of the libraries, and the end was devoted to the 16 different translation of Perec's Le Desperation, which was pretty fascinating.
I only knew about like 3 of these. The 3 that she mentions are the ones I know of. I didn't realize there's 16.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Well, she seems to imply, maybe not directly, but maybe because there's another thing she mentions later on, that these are translations that perhaps were never actually published.
Yeah, they're never. Yeah,
okay.
The only one that's ever been published is Gilbert Adair's one, Avoid. But the other ones are like, if you're involved with the Oulipo or know people who are a part of that scene, they'll reference them. Like Vanished and A Vanishing come up a lot, especially A Vanishing by Ian Monk.
The Vanished with the apostrophe in place of the E.
That's a cheat.
That's horrible. I don't approve of that.
That's a cheat. A Vanishing makes sense, though.
Yes. Yeah, sure. The other translations displayed at the exhibit, she goes on, were in Spanish, missing A, the Russian missing the O, Turkish and German missing the E's as well, and plenty of others.
Okay, never mind. I have heard of some of these other... I thought she went 16 into English.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were saying.
That's what I thought too. I missed this line the first time I read this email. Yeah, I have heard about some of these other translations, which is fascinating.
And then there's this whole other discussion of Queneau's 100 milliards de poèmes, which Queneau described as a poem-making machine. And so it's, this sonnets, obviously 14 lines each, and the lines are separated, attached only at the book binding, so you can combine them to form any other sonnet with any other line. And the total possible numbers of poems is 10 to the 14th power. Anyway, so the 2 published English translations have been called 100,000 billion poems, and one by John Crombie called 100 million poems.
Do you have this book in your store?
I've never even heard of this.
Oh, it's so cool. It's super cool. I think that where I have it, I think I have the Chapman one that's in the Oulipo Compendium, and that's where I have it. It was in that book that came out some time ago. I'm almost positive that's where it is. And it's not cut. It's just the pages, but you could just cut them if you want to. And it literally is, it's just a combinatorial machine where you can choose one of 10 different lines for each one of the 14 lines of the sonnet.
I see.
It's super cool. I think someone might have put this online because it lends itself to that of like, give me a random poem. Right. But yeah, I don't know how you say that number either. You need to finish the last line of this, I suppose.
Oh, I just closed it. Hold on. What is that number?
100,000 billion or 100 million?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a lot of zeros.
It's a shitload of zeros.
9, 12, 14 zeros. Yeah.
10 to the 14th power.
I guess so.
A 10 to the 14th power poems.
There you go. Wouldn't that be 1 to the 14th power? I know nothing about math, I should point out.
Yeah, I think we're all out of our league. We're on like 5 zeros.
Yeah, no, I think yeah, very true. Well, there's also the confusion over what a billion is in UK versus US, because I believe a billion is different in the UK and the US when they refer to that number, because they have like 1,000 million, and a million is a billion. whereas we say 1,000 million equals a billion.
So this is stupid because obviously metric and what do you call the other one?
I don't think it's dealing with the metric thing. I think it's just a convention of math, where like most times when you have 10 tens, it's 100, 100 hundreds is 1,000, 1,000 thousands is a million, and then a million millions would be a billion, but we say 1,000 millions equals a billion.
Right. I was just gonna ask, like, how do scientists from different countries negotiate this?
They don't use words. I just typed in definition billion, and the first thing it says is a very large number. What the fuck is that? Of course it's a very large number. That is the most useless definition I've ever seen. Stupid Google. There's one other email that I just want to say real quick, was that someone emailed us way back when, and because I never check our email until today. Patrick from Downtown Books and News, asked about the author's name from Brazil that we mentioned that was friends with Lispector. That is Lucio Cardoso. And he's passed away. His nephew, Raphael, is the one that we got the rights to this book of Lucio's from. And the book that we're publishing, I think in the beginning of 2017, that Margaret Jules Costa is translating, is called Chronicle of the Murdered House. So if Patrick still listens to us, and this isn't you, Patrick, that is the answer to your question. And I promise if you email us again, it won't take 4 months to answer you. And I'm going to mention one more email as we segue into our discussion of Denis Johnson that we should all bear in mind. My friend and former colleague from McNally Jackson, Doug Singleton, wrote in after our Bolaño discussion asking us not to spoil the plot. Of this book?
Well, we spoiled the plot of the Bolaño book. And so I think he said, if we do this again, please don't spoil the plot.
I feel like there's no way not to spoil the plot.
Can we just say listen later?
Read the book first.
Yeah, I guess so. Or maybe if we feel like we're getting towards a part of the plot that is a reveal or a surprise or some sort of thing, we should just say, okay, we're now at the spoiler alert part. I don't know how these things work. I don't know how movie critics bear all this in mind so well when they do these things.
I don't know what counts as a spoiler necessarily either.
Yeah, I mean, it's a book about... in the case of Bolaño, it's a book in which really nothing happens. So there's nothing really to spoil, you know?
Yeah.
And this is kind of a book where a lot happens, and you don't know what really matters most as a spoiler and what is just the next bizarre event.
Yeah. So, Patrick, do you want to take a shot at explaining, without spoiling it, a basic setup for the Laughing Monsters?
Sure. Nair is a Dutch-American. I guess there's confusion over that.
I thought he's Danish-American.
Is it Danish? Yes. Yeah. Okay.
But he lives in Amsterdam.
Right. And he's gone to... Where do they even start? They start in Freetown?
Yeah.
And he works for NATO, and he ends up meeting with his former spy friend, Michael Adrico, who at this point is just working for himself. And what is...
and Michael has a scheme.
Yeah, I mean, Michael has a scheme, and Nair has his own scheme. And then there's also Nair's actual mission, which is sort of unclear, but he's still communicating with his NATO superiors for at least part of it.
Right.
And I don't know, things go off the rails fairly quickly. Lots of drinking.
Spoiler alert, not at the end.
I should say this is my day off. I have Monday and Tuesdays off, and I went to the gym this morning, and I'm doing this podcast, and I am drinking a beer right now, so.
Well, I figured you would have been drinking from last night's ending of the national championship onwards, but I need to save the national championship talk for the end.
Okay. Yes. Anyway, please continue.
I don't know more. I mean, in terms of the plot, I don't know what else more to say.
I mean, they're basically I'll try my hand at this without spoiling too much too. Is that Nair is there essentially to find out what the hell is going on with Michael? That he has a plan. There's some sort of rumors as to what this plan or scheme might be. but Nair is given no information essentially from his superiors, and he's also there to like essentially double cross or like do his own little thing, illegal activity to make certain amount of money. And the whole setup is this sort of like Africa of the post 9/11 world in which lots of things are possible and there's no real clear control. And so if you can figure out, it reminds me, well, let me get to that in a second. So there's lots of other people down there that they see from their past days in Africa and in these various agencies. Like they see someone from MI5 at a hotel. They're suspicious of other people, and then they're moving to like Uganda and the Congo. And Michael has brought with him this woman whose dad is the commander of like U.S. Army. I don't know if it's I want to say like, and tribe's the wrong word. Troops? I don't know. He's
a commander of a base that I think they're trained special forces, and he was one of the commanders at that base, right?
Yeah, so I just don't know what the term is for a group of soldiers, which sounds really stupid to say out loud.
Well, it depends on the size of the group, yes.
Okay, so he's in charge of some soldiers, some secret, some special operations things. His daughter is now with Michael, and Michael wants to bring her to his old tribe because he was born in Uganda, right?
Yeah.
And then, and to marry her.
Rural Uganda.
Right. Yeah, like a particular type, the Kakwa, I believe is his group of people. And he's been involved with lots of different people throughout his life. He's filled with secrets. He never really fills in there on like what his plan is that he's there. And so everyone's trying to figure out what's happening and what all the lies are. Because basically, like in this post 9/11 world, if you say like one of the great bits of this is like where I think it's Michael says like if you say terrorism, people like give you as much money as you want, because like if there's any chance that there's something being plotted, which seems very possible, or some important materials being exchanged, which seems very possible in the Africa that's described in this book, bringing that to the attention of someone with more money to keep the world safe will get you a lot of money. So it's all about finding information.
Yes, and I will say what I found interesting about their portrayal of that, and we need to have this discussion at some point, but how Denis Johnson knows all of this so intimately and with such nuance is quite remarkable. But there's definitely and I don't think we've truly laid this out, a heavy dose of cynicism to everything that's going on. No one trusts anyone. They don't actually believe that they're accomplishing any of these goals that are set out. They don't believe that their superiors even believe in the missions that they're handing out. And it's, they chase information to say that they're chasing information. They try to stop plots for the sake of saying that they're trying to do that. No one believes that they can stop it. What seems to reign is this, notion of just total chaos in Africa. And, because of that, both of the main characters sort of become opportunistic, shamelessly opportunistic and self-interested. And, they might have had ideals at some point. And Michael, more than Nair, seems to sort of believe that there's a way to, for good to triumph over evil in Africa. But he's still just trying to make as much money as he can on the side and get the hell out of there. His optimism creeps up every once in a while, but it's being outweighed very seriously by his cynicism. Yeah.
There's this is I have to do too is that you've been watching Utopia, the UK show, as well as I know, and there's that great bit in there where it comes up twice in which people say like, which side are you on? And they're like, there are no sides. There's only people who are useful and people who are not. And that's the morality that sort of drives the core of this book too. Is it's not like there are sides to preventing or stopping things, just people who are useful to you or not.
And that's if you can even figure out if they're useful or not. I mean, I feel like half the time they have no idea, even for their self-interested missions, they have no faith in being successful or knowing what their own mission is. I mean, they have this like fantasy of like using their money to become like lord over a gang, and it doesn't seem like they think that's actually possible either. It's just this weird fantasy for something.
Yeah. How does this? So you guys have read a lot of Denis Johnson books of the more recent ones. I read Jesus' Son a million years ago. and then nothing since then.
Well, for me, it's just Jesus on Train Dreams and then this. And just Train Dreams is fantastic.
Well, you guys are really missing out on Tree of Smoke. This reminded me of Tree of Smoke more than any other of his other books. Tree of Smoke is the Vietnam book, and definitely, deals with very similar issues. I mean, it's more official. The characters and the setting of Tree of Smoke is definitely like an official sort of military operation. But there's a rogue. I don't want to say he's like doing horrible things, but he's definitely got ties to the CIA sort of general, and there's some things going on, and it's shady, and it's this big, massive, convoluted sort of plot, and it veers a little towards the Pynchonian sort of worldview, but it's just phenomenal. His portrayal of Vietnam and petty corruption and egomania and the things that must have been going on the ground, apart from just everyday fear of death. Really, really wonderful. I mean that book won the National Book Award. I think it's a masterpiece. It's really, really good. And this book is a lot like that.
The Daniel Greene, who's a reviewer and critic, wrote up a piece on this for Full Stop, and he talks about the Tree of Smoke and the similarities there. The other book that he mentions is The Stars at Noon, which is set in Nicaragua.
I've never read that one.
Okay. That's one of the ones that he mentions. But this, because you brought it up, might be of interest to you. This is from his review. The Laughing Monsters is not an altogether tedious read. Its origins and Johnson's own reporting on the situation in Africa gives its rendering of character and setting a tacit authenticity. So apparently how he knows that is somewhat out of his reporting on Africa.
He spent time in there.
I guess so.
There's some nonfiction that reviews of that Laughing Monsters have mentioned that are about his essays about his time there, and I'm curious about them, but I haven't read them.
I wonder when he was there, because I mean his portrayal does seem to be rather contemporary. But that said, I mean,
it was Seek. Seek is the book that you're referring to, I think.
I will say, I mean, I was in Africa 15 years ago at this point for 2 years, and, this rings true. It absolutely rings true. Like, what it's like to be the only white person in the market and at the hotel and running into shady characters and sort of weird conversations you have with other expats and the sense of dread you have over, the government and whatever country you're in at that time. It all just totally very, very accurate. And that was 15 years ago. So maybe it's just a permanent sort of portrayal. I don't know.
I don't think that he was there at a dissimilar time from you. According to the thing I found, Seek came out in 2002, and it's part political disquisition, part travel journal. I can't say any words today. Part travel journal, part self-exploration. It's essays and articles about Africa. A lot of them involve Africa, like war-ravaged Liberia.
Okay.
So it must have been probably not that much different from the time that you were there.
Yeah. Which, and again, unfortunately, things don't change so rapidly. Especially, the people in power change, but the situation on the ground probably doesn't.
I mean, there's even that sense in the book that nothing has changed since the last time that Michael and Nair got together, which I don't know the last time they were together in Africa in the book, but I mean, the last time that Nair was in Africa, he seems to think nothing has changed. He lands and he sees someone who he's familiar with immediately, and just continues to run into people he knows.
And there is one of the things I think makes his character interesting. So they're both sort of despicable because they're not also. I mean, this is spoiler alert. So close your ears for the next 5 seconds. But Nair tries to take Michael's girlfriend, his fiancée, from him, and is sort of willing to sell out or willing to do whatever it takes to keep himself alive and get through this. But there is a great moment in which he talks about why he would, Michael's explaining this initial plan that he has, this scheme he has for ripping off some people, which I won't reveal this because it is part of the plot. But how he's going to rip them off and steal their money from the table, essentially millions of dollars, and And Nair's like, this is insane. This is this terrible idea. This is never going to work out. We should never do this. And then Michael asks him if he's like wants to go back to his other life and just leave now. And Nair's like, no, like I can't do that. Like I have to be here in this kind of chaos. And that's the thing that attracts him most to Africa early on in the book is the kind of the chaos, the adventure of it, the fact that everything can turn on a dime, that things that go from being incredibly horrible can become incredibly good if you're on the right side all of a sudden. And that it's all like this kind of exchanges of that sort.
Yeah, there's hardly a difference between a good plan and a bad plan. Just as long as you have something to go with, it's going to get messed up regardless. And so they just kind of dive in. And I think that the chaos is, they go to each other for that. They both know that the other is going to bring a new level of mistrust and chaos and mistake to the plan, but they want it from each other.
Yeah, very much so.
They're
not even certain. Sorry, Tom.
I was just going to say, I think underneath the, like, no, they really don't trust each other at all, but they respect each other in the way that, enemy combatants or, opposing football teams or boxers or whatever totally respect the other's experience and abilities. And, sometimes it's better, what is the phrase? The devil you know and better than the devil you don't, So they kind of go along with it knowing that, when the shit hits the fan, this person might stab me in the back, but maybe they'll save me, and I would trust them to save me more than anyone else.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I found interesting about it, too, just personally, and I don't know how this compares to Tree of Smoke, which I have on my, just outside of reach on my desk. So I checked it out from the library when we started working on this one. But is the way in which the writing style is fairly straightforward. It's not like particularly crazy in any way or adventurous or experimental in any way. It's very good and very solid and very, very clean. But the thing that I think is interesting is the way in which, as the book evolves, it switches from his general descriptions into mostly being are things that he's writing to one of the two women, to the woman back home, Tina, or to Davidia. It's her name, I think, Michael's lady. And that in that frame, because you've seen him work on these emails and delete things and change things and is aware of like how he's presenting himself. And that slight subtle change, I think it becomes really interesting to see like how he's explaining stuff to everyone else and what gaps aren't being filled in. So going from like our kind of play-by-play, here's how things are progressing in Africa, to like now he's writing these missives that are like late at night, scrawled in pencil at times, completely illegible according to his own thing, to then later on like being more like clean sheets of paper. Like his situation changes constantly, and we don't get like the like necessarily like here's how this played out, but kind of like these broad swooping ideas. But I think that the way that perspective changes on his point of view is really interesting and makes this book kind of work really well towards the end and not just become like it doesn't get derailed at any point because of that.
But I think it comes close to getting derailed, which is kind of what I really love about it, is Nair just gets, further and further off the rails.
Yeah.
There's a scene when he's drugged and it just slips into that hallucination without really explaining that he's been drugged until afterwards. And it's kind of from that point on that is just further out of it and further just confused. And it does come close to being completely lost when you have no idea what his next step is. But I think you're right that it does just tread that line without going off it.
Did you? I mean, like he can go sort of derailed, but the book itself, like, if we had followed his like that sort of hallucinatory like derailment from that perspective, that's in the first chapter and the second chapter, I think it would have been a less successful book than like the third and fourth chapters, which are frequently just basically his writing things up as a character to people. I think that works really well. I think
to that point, I think that helps save this book from just being a cynical portrait of Africa by a Westerner. I think it helps, remind the reader and, the world at large that, like, this is just one cynical man's take on what's going on. And, he's choosing to put himself in situations where he should be, cynical and upset and afraid and all of these sorts of things. That his experience, it makes his experience more singular as opposed to, universal. Like if you were to just go to Africa and try to, get a sense of what was going on, you could have a very different experience. And I think that's what, bringing his narration in and having it be so emotional, like he's at his wit's ends, sort of. Mm-hmm. He never says as much. He tries to put up this good face, and every once in a while, like slips into like, I might never see you again, kind of, desperation. But generally, I think it helps save the book from becoming something that no one would really want.
That's true.
And I think Nair does have the exact sense that Johnson's working against by doing that. I think Nair thinks his Africa is Africa, whereas I think you're right that by pulling back, Johnson is putting it on Nair as opposed to the actual larger perspective.
Right. Yes, Johnson is very, very smart about these things in every book he's ever written. So.
Mm-hmm.
Did you, Patrick? I think you said and mentioned, and maybe I'm misremembering this, but like that you had some particular scenes that you thought were really like interesting or crazy or something.
I mean, I think just in terms of it's that near going off the rails. I was revisiting it this weekend, and there's a driving sequence where Michael's starting to lose it, because that's another thing. Michael has these dreams at night that make him seem completely insane, and Davidia thinks he's gone insane, and Nair is basically just saying, no, that's fine. That's what happens to him when we're here. And they're on a massive driving, just panic driving fast, swerving to miss things, and they hit someone and probably kill the woman. And that scene, when I remembered it, felt much longer than it was, and I went back to it, and the hitting the woman is just like this little paragraph, but the fact that it actually really affects Nair, even though he moves on almost immediately and only remembers it like once later, that scene stuck out just as him actually having some level of empathy for this place, even amidst it being crazy. I think when when Michael's craziest, Nair goes a little calmer, and when Nair's crazier, Michael goes a little calmer, and I think that's part of that type of trust your enemy that Tom was talking about.
That's funny. I remember that scene being very emotional when I read it, and because you can sort of, having been in Africa, like the driving at night in the middle of nowhere, like it's weird. Africa's weird. There's no lights, there's no anything, and people do just drive everywhere. And it does feel slightly terrifying to drive around there. But yeah, to me, I think, you get Nair's viewpoint, and then as a reader, I think we feel the same way. And then Michael's, blatant disinterest in the situation is startling. That's when you start to look. You don't trust Michael to begin with, but that's the point at which you're just like, wow, this guy is really just trying to save his life, and he has no idea how to do it.
Where is that? Do you know what page that's on?
I think I marked it.
I thought I did too, and I think I just found it. Yep, I just did. It's on page 134.
In Uganda, yes? Or on the border?
Yeah, I think that's when they're going across the border, I think. Yeah.
Here's the bit for anyone. I'll just read this, because this does give a sense of how... it's kind of long, but whatever. Daylight was almost gone as we got near the border, a good circumstance for people smuggling themselves, and we passed among groves of tall eucalyptus, Michael driving like an African, far too fast for the crumbling red dirt surface. I mean fast, 90 or 95 kilometers per hour mostly, scaring the bikes to the side by means of constant beeping, using the horn much more than the brakes, oblivious to the children, goats, ducks, trucks coming at us, the overloaded buses appearing around road bends, leaning on two wheels, and women walking down the road balancing burdens on their heads, mostly basins full of quote-unquote white ants, centimeter-long termites they sell in the market as snacks. I've never tried them, but it's a comfort to realize that every couple hundred meters or so across this land, a chest-high berm teems with nutrient morsels. One of these women crossed our path, her right hand raised to steady the pan on her head, blocking half her sight. She couldn't have seen us. She kept walking to the road. Michael tried to veer, and we hit her. We struck her down. I heard her say, in a way I've never heard it said. Never. And the Jeep swerved, bounced, straightened, and kept on. I looked back. She was flung down on the clay pavement in the dust. She looked lifeless. Davidia said, Michael, she's hurt. She wasn't watching, he said angrily, going faster now. His shoulders hunched as he pushed the accelerator hard, and we were racing away from, what, a murder perhaps? We'd never know. Michael, Davidia said, but Michael said nothing, and she said, go back. But we wouldn't go back. We couldn't, not in Africa, this hard land where nobody could help that poor woman, flopped probably dead in the road, and where running away from this was not a mistake. The mistake was looking back at her in the first place. Which, yeah, that's pretty intense.
Yeah.
Nothing more to say than that. That's it.
So, yeah, I mean, for me, the book is a success primarily for the way that the relationships between all of the characters are so nuanced and complicated, and that there's no moral that, Johnson is trying to force down anyone's throat, and there's no worldview that he's insisting upon or anything. It's just, this wonderful scene of a place that, not very many people understand, and I certainly don't understand very well, but that, with the right sort of powerful writing and, insight, you can, get a glimpse and understand a little bit of the politics, a little bit of the chaos, and a little bit of, the way humanity is trying to function down there. And it's you can't, even though it's one European/American man and one African who seems to be sort of nationless at this point because of all the things he's done, it's a really humane, sort of human level interest book. And I thought it was beautifully written and beautifully portrayed, just like the interpersonal relationships in these, totally chaotic situations.
I agree with that.
Like the antidote to anything ever written by Jonathan Franzen.
I'm glad we got a chance to laugh at Jonathan Franzen.
Yeah, if there's a podcast that goes by without making fun of Jonathan Franzen, that should be corrected. What did you, hey, Tom, I have a question for you. What parts of Africa did you visit when because you were in Madagascar, correct?
Yes, I was in Madagascar for the 2 years. I made side trips. I made a side trip to the Comoros, which is the predominantly Muslim island nation in the Mozambique Channel between Mozambique and Madagascar.
Okay.
I visited Kenya. Was in Nairobi and then around there for a week or so, and then I was in Tanzania. And then took a plane and spent a little over a month in South Africa visiting. I drove all the way across South Africa. That was interesting.
That's cool.
So I never made it up to this part of Africa, but South Africa in particular and Kenya were fascinating places.
Patrick, have you ever been to Africa?
No. Closest I've come is my sister going.
Oh. Which counts for something.
I will say, Madagascar at the time was relatively peaceful. There weren't, civil wars or coups or anything going on. It did occur shortly after I left, but the rampant corruption and the lives of expats, mostly French, living in Madagascar is fascinating. I mean, I was under the belief that 9 of the 10, permanent resident expats that lived, especially where I was, like way down in the middle of nowhere, were definitely on the run from some past life in Europe. They just all had that air about them where you wouldn't trust them at all. A lot of strange interactions, that's for sure.
And I can imagine. It's interesting to me that this is the second book that I've read this year or within the past couple of months that sort of had like a Heart of Darkness vibe in some way, or as a backdrop, as something that people are aware of. Like there's the kind of going into the spot, understanding the darkness of your own soul sort of vibe to this, but also a book of Strange New Things, the Michel Faber book, that also has like a Heart of Darkness sequence in which like he's going to an alien world to this minister is to preach to Christianity to aliens on this space, and has like some of the similar structures and some of the hints to it. And it seems interesting to me that book would be coming up a lot in 2014, or in these two cases, almost as if like the post 9/11 world in this case becomes like a Heart of Darkness situation in which you can't understand what's really going on because everything's like confused and lying. And almost at the other one, it's the same sort of thing of like the world is a different place, and we have to, and coming to understand it is really a reflection on yourself, or seeing the other is like somewhat of a reflection on yourself and your own like darkness inside. But I think it's kind of interesting both of those came up in the past two of the past three books that I've read.
It's funny, when we started talking about A Tree of Smoke in relation to this one, it made me, for whatever reason, think of, please feel free to make fun of me, but Alex Garland, I know, wrote a book called The Tesseract.
Yeah. I never read that, but I know what you're talking about.
It's very good, and it's very similar to Laughing Monsters. It's not at all like, The Beach. Is that what Alex Garland is known for?
Yeah, that's not one I know.
That's like, that was made into a movie too, wasn't it?
Yeah, with like Leo DiCaprio, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he's doing the Beach. I think he's doing a new movie now, actually, or a new thing. I saw his name pop up at some point recently.
Alex Garland? Didn't he also write the script for 28 Days Later?
Oh, is it 28 days? I wanted to say Sunshine. I could be completely
It's 28 Days Later and Sunshine.
Okay.
I was going to say both of those, yes.
Never Let Me Go. Ex Machina is the one that I heard about. He's the screenplay and director for Ex Machina, a British science fiction thriller film. I don't know why I know this or why I saw this, but it popped up somewhere. But anyway,
I actually love Sunshine.
I had problems with it, but I enjoyed watching it. Visually, I enjoyed watching it. I thought it really went off the rails at the end there.
Yeah, when I first saw it, I had a theory for why the off the rails make sense, but every time I've rewatched it, I can't remember what my theory was. So I think I've had to accept that it does just go off the rails. But I had a theory at one point that made total sense to me.
I love those ideas. I have that happen more than I should admit. Speaking of movies, just not to segue too much or not to digress too much, but I think, Tom, I might be seeing Inherent Vice tomorrow.
Good luck with that.
Yep.
I'm not paying to see it in the theater. I feel like I'm just going to be really much too cynical and unreceptive to what charm the movie, I imagine, does offer. But yeah, I don't know. I saw the long trailer when I saw another movie, Interstellar, I think, and I don't know. It just does not look like what I know of Thomas Pynchon, and that's fine. It just makes it a different movie. That's all. I will say, a friend of mine saw it, David, who you know, saw it and told me that it seemed like P.T. Anderson was trying to remake, or not remake, but evoke. Like The Long Goodbye or something like that. Like a different era, 70s sort of noir, but, set in California, so more playful and that sort of thing.
Well, that sounds interesting for P.T. Anderson, but I mean, I don't know. I actually haven't read Inherent Vice, so as terms of Pynchon, I don't know. But if you pitch me just a normal P.T. Anderson movie that way, I'd be down.
I'm not a fan of P.T. Anderson, and Inherent Vice isn't my favorite Pynchon book either. So this is like a mixture of all things. But seeing that every single person I know knows that I love Pynchon, and that any one of them that sees this movie texts me about it, I feel like I should see it at least to be able to interact or push them off or whatever. like, yeah, that's great. It also sucks. Fuck P.T. Anderson. Long live Bleeding Edge or something like. I need a read on this.
I don't really like P.T. Anderson either. He's done some movies I like, but most I don't. And this seems totally different than any of those, so that might be a good thing. But yeah, my problem is just I'm very, very much a fan of Pynchon's writing, and I don't want to see it bastardized in this way. And my friend, the people I know who've seen it, read the book beforehand, and said, yeah, it's really not the book.
Yeah.
And it's fine. It's a good movie, but it's not the book. And I said, well, I don't know. It might take me time to separate them.
Yeah. And I think it's generally the issue with movie adaptations. That's why they usually bore more than anything else.
Right.
I agree.
Except Blade Runner.
Yeah.
But that's nothing like the book.
No.
Not plot-wise, but in terms of tone and themes, it's totally like the book. That's one of the things I love about that movie. I love it as an adaptation.
Yes, it's even a little darker, I think, than Philip K. Dick's general sort of tone. I mean, Dick has that ability to like dip into like truly dark passages, but overall it's not nearly right. You know, he's not thought. I mean, to my mind, he's funny and playful with the plots as opposed to truly dark. In that book, he definitely veers towards dark at the end, but the movie version is very dark, very dark. But it's a great adaptation because it's such a fascinating concept to adapt visually.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now that we're all nerding out about Philip K. Dick and Blade Runner.
Absolutely. Which is great. I don't have anything else to say about Laughing Monster except that I think I would recommend it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely recommend it. I mean, this book needs to be read by people. It's just a wonderful book. And we didn't touch on it because we sort of, just like the book does, sort of discount the political sort of statement that it's making about, you know, the ineffectiveness of NATO and CIA and all of that sort of stuff. But you know, if anyone's got an interest in that sort of thing, there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
You will, you know, it treats it cynically, but you know, I don't know. Where's the evidence that we shouldn't treat all these things cynically? You know. So yes, that. I gave my copy to. I have a good friend from when I was in Peace Corps who works for Human Rights Watch, and you know, so his life is, you know, focused on those things as opposed to art. But we were traveling together in Cuba, and I finished Tree of Smoke and gave it to him, and I was like, "You're going to love this." And like 3 weeks later, we went out for beers and like spent 3 hours talking about Tree of Smoke and how much he loved it. So when I finished Laughing Monsters, I gave it to him. Oddly, I don't think he's read it yet. He now has a child, so that might have something to do with it. But I will have to find out what his opinion of it is. And he has spent a lot more time in Africa than I have doing work. He was the researcher for Nigeria for 2 years,
wow,
which is a horrible, totally corrupt place, and Ethiopia as well. And he's been to Somalia, Somaliland, all those places, Uganda, sort of interviewing victims of human rights abuses. So,
man,
yeah, I'll let you know what he thinks.
He might have a slightly different take.
Yeah, but I gave it to him because I think he'll appreciate it. I think he'll agree that, you know, the portrayal of expat, especially sort of existence down there, is very accurate.
And it's a very readable book. So anyone who's looking for something that's like enjoyable, readable, interesting, uncertain, has some spy elements.
I just wanted to revisit it this weekend to talk about stuff, and I just found myself, I wanted to like check a page, and then it's 10 pages later, I'm still reading the thing again. It's definitely enjoyable and readable.
And I think I can go back and read some of his books now. I stopped back when I worked at the bookstore in North Carolina at Quill Ridge, there's a guy who is going into Iowa's writing program in the fall who I did not like much at all. Like, I just found him pretentious and annoying and had mostly shitty taste in books. But he recommended Jesus' Son, which I read and liked. But I was like, well, if this guy likes it, fuck that. I'm just not gonna read this author anymore because fuck that guy. But that was 17 years ago, so I think I can let that go.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm pretty sure that my grudge my weird prejudice can be put aside, and I can read Tree of Smoke happily.
17 years is how long your grudges last?
Yep. Generally speaking, I think. 17 is a good number of years. Yeah. Anyway, so are you still excited about the national championship?
Yeah, it's very. I mean, I woke up to the game ended fairly late last night.
Yeah.
And, suffice to say, most of my friends are not Ohio State fans, and just didn't stay up. Or, you know, I have a friend who lives in Europe. Like, it would have been a nightmare for him to try to watch the game, even if he wanted to. But yeah, I woke up to a series of texts that are like, "Oh my God, congratulations!" And I love that I can sit here and pretend like I had any role whatsoever in Ohio State's victory, other than the fact that, I paid for tuition there 16 years ago.
There is something, that's the fun part of liking sports, though, is the one time that you win. Because most of the time, unless you're a fan of, I don't know, the Red Sox or the Patriots, Patrick, you tend to lose a lot.
Yeah. And if you're a fan of the teams that I'm a fan of, yeah, we don't win. The Mets, Jets, and Knicks are just god awful.
Oh, God.
You really like a trifecta of the shittiest franchises right now.
This is true. Anyway, it was great to win. I was giddy at 1 a.m. last night watching all the stupid interviews usually those stupid interviews after games are like, how did you win? What does this feel like? And like,
we ran the ball, we threw the ball.
Yeah, and the players
I just want to go to bed right after I watch my teams win. I don't want to watch those things. Just go to sleep.
But I don't watch, like I immediately turn it off after the Super Bowl when it's two teams I don't care about. But last night I was just like, I got to watch. I'm very curious and just sort of soaking it all in. So
Urban Meyer looked like he could continue because he had that heart problem before, right?
He's only 50 years old.
I know he's not old, but he seemed super stressed out a few years ago at Florida. And he seemed in charge and cool and collected yesterday, more so than I guess I had remembered from the last time that he would have been there.
Yeah, no, he didn't seem quite as fired. Like, even the one time, I forget what it was, but late in the game, he was trying to the play clock hadn't reset itself, and so they were about to, get a delay of game or something like that. And he started harassing whatever official was closest to him on the sideline. And, it kind of looked like he was going to go into one of those tirades, and then he immediately just calmed down. And I was like, oh, good. All right. He got the answer he wanted. He's done. He's just going to let it go, So, yeah, hopefully he stays at Ohio State for another decade and we win some more. But I don't expect that'll happen. I'm sure next year we'll be 10-3.
Yeah, it always happens like that. It's nice to catch that win. Is there anything else, or should we do our raves and rants?
Raves and rants, because I'm sure everything we just talked about is just going to get deleted. So.
No way, because I'm going to segue into this. And my rant is against Fall Out Boy. I fucking hate Fall Out Boy, and I want them to just go away forever and never have one of their shitty-ass songs be the one song that they play over and over again for sporting events finale. So this national championship, which I'm going to force everyone listening to this podcast will have already heard this, to listen to the beginning or part of that Champions song that they played all leading up to this national championship game last night, and which I hate, and which I feel like it makes my ears bleed and I can't stand it, and it's by fucking Fall Out Boy, which turns out is also the shitty band that sings that, like, This Song Is On Fire song that they always use for the MLB, or they used for the MLB playoffs 2 years ago when the Cardinals lost to the Red Sox. So I had to hear that song a million times. Just go the fuck away. You're not an interesting band. You're terrible. You suck. And please, Disney /ESPN /whomever the fuck owns the baseball players, stop using their songs endlessly in these commercials for sporting events. We don't need the music to begin with, and we don't need it to be something that's awful. That's it. Fuck Fall Out Boy.
I thought they had gone away.
I thought so too, but then I was like, what is this annoying song? And I looked and it was like, it's by Fall Out Boy. It's like, no, never again. They must be stopped.
Before I get to my rage, this does remind me of, I don't know if you saw this on Deadspin a couple weeks ago, but so Ohio State, in all their infinite wisdom, decided for home games that they were going to create an account, a text account, a way of complaining about unruly situations in the stands at Ohio State home games in Ohio Stadium. Which, by the way, it's on campus. Alcohol, in theory, is not allowed. So this, I think, was, a way of getting, people who pay for tickets, parents and whatnot, to sort of rat out drunk college kids.
Yeah.
Anyway, the far worse than anything, there weren't that many complaints about fans nearby being unruly. There were tons and tons of complaints from fans that the Ohio State marching band, known as the best damn band in the land, by the way, could not be heard because of the piped in pop music. And I was like, God bless these fans. They really just want to hear their band. They don't want to hear piped in music. And I feel like this should be a lesson to the sporting world at large, is that, people like college bands, and people don't want to listen to Fall Out Boy, the lead in every.
Yeah, I like that the rant and the rave go together nicely.
That is not actually a rave. I was going to rave about when you texted me, I was walking somewhere and hadn't really thought about a rave at all. Truth is, I forget about these things. Then I was like, all right, what can I possibly rave about? And the first thing that popped in my head 10 seconds later was, I would just like to recommend people seek out a small press out of Los Angeles called Semiotext, and that's with an E in parentheses at the end, who is 30 years old, which I'm embarrassed I did not realize, who are, and I'm reading from their About page, who are, quote, best known for its introduction of French theory to American readers. Semiotext has been one of America's most influential independent presses since its inception more than 3 decades ago, publishing works of theory, fiction, madness, economics, satire, sexuality, sci-fi, activism, and confession. Semiotext's highly curated list has famously melded high and low forms of cultural expression into a nuanced and polemical vision of the present. And I would just I just read the collective Tikkun, the magazine, the French magazine, the English translation of Preliminary Materials for the Theory of a Young Girl, which is sort of feminist, capitalist exploration. It's not really a laid out theory. And they also did the Invisible Committee's Coming Insurrection. They'll be doing the Invisible Committee's To Our Friends, which is already out in France and coming out from Semiotext later this year. And they've published, the list is very impressive. But Baudrillard, William Burroughs, Paul Virillo, Catherine Breillat, the director, Eileen Miles, who else? Felix Guderian, Michel T, Penny Arcade, Guy Debord, Michelle Bernstein, who else? There's this massive list. Gary Indiana, Fanny Howe, Chris Kraus.
And my favorite recent book of theirs is Fantomas and the International Vampires by Julio Cortázar.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I didn't know they did that. I'm looking at the list right now. Kate Zambrano. Who else? There's just tons and tons of people.
Yeah,
they published really good stuff. It's generally short. It's, it's not always accessible. I feel like some of their books should have a prerequisite thing on the cover somewhere, like, to read this, you should probably have read this beforehand, kind of thing. But you can generally suss out what they're talking about, and they're just beautiful little editions. And I really love what they do. And there aren't a whole lot of publishers out there where, you see their logo or you see their familiar design and you say, I bet this book is good. I'm going to pick it up.
Yeah.
And they are one of them for me. And I would like more people to share in them. And the only reason I wanted to single them out is because we generally don't talk too much about translated nonfiction. So this was a chance to do that.
Although, have you read the Limonov book?
No, not yet.
You read that, Patrick, didn't you?
Yeah. It's really good.
It's fucking amazingly good.
Yeah.
I love Carrere, but I don't know. The subject matter is not. It's not right up my alley. I'll say that.
I think that's. I couldn't care about the subject matter when I started that one. He just makes it interesting.
I'd read Limonov a million years ago, back during Delkey times, when his books are out of print, like Call Me Eddie and all those things. So I knew of him, and that he had become a crazy person that was firing machine guns into villages during the Yugoslav war and that kind of stuff. But the book itself, the Limonov book itself, is really fascinating, and kind of this desire, I like the way that it kind of exposes Limonov's desire to figure out an ending, almost to his life, of how is he going to be important and meaningful, and that sort of ties into how his life is going to end. And I think that seems really important.
Karar is struggling to end the story himself. I mean, I think Karar is trying, knowing that Limonov wants his life to be this big story, and Karar is trying to figure out what story to give him and how much he wants to satisfy Limonov and how much he wants to try to be honest about the fucked up things that Limonov does.
Speaking about Russians, Prokhorov's selling the Brooklyn Nets.
Yeah, I don't really know what to say about that.
I just thought I'd throw that out there because it popped up.
I have no interest in the Brooklyn Nets. Their stadium is literally down the street from my apartment. I'm a Knicks fan. They don't interest me.
They don't even exist.
It's funny. I saw. I'm not going to call him out because he'd probably be embarrassed. But someone I know who's an NBA writer was tweeting about the Nets, and he said, "Is this a good move for New Jersey?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, they don't play in New Jersey anymore." Someone pointed it out to him, and he took it down. But yeah, that's embarrassing. But I think that's how we all feel, was my point. We all sort of still feel like they're just the New Jersey Nets. They're sort of bumbling, and they're going to make the wrong decisions no matter what. Not that the Knicks are any better, clearly.
Although the Knicks are they're getting ready for next year, right?
Yeah, except we're only like a third of the way through this season.
I mean, it's going to be a painfully long season.
Yeah. No, I can't even bring myself to watch anymore. It's bad.
I watched like one or two games and it was just a disaster. Because I like watching the NBA at times, especially when it's on like ESPN or TBS, where you get to see like other teams. But we have the Sky or MSG or whatever shows all the Knicks games, so they seem to be on constantly, failing.
Yep. But at least you get Clyde Frazier.
Yeah, there you go.
Clyde Frazier.
Do you want to do a rant or a rave, Patrick?
No, I won't, but I will mildly point out that I'm in an extra office with the door shut and you guys on my headphones, and I got a note asking me to be quieter and please turn the volume down. So I think that should be suggestive of what a rant would consist of.
Wow.
Wow.
That's kind of nuts. It's not like you've been talking very loud or
Yep.
or like nonstop.
So that's the placement of my rant.
Oh, geez. That is bad. But
there's a smiley face on the note, so.
Passive. I think your rant is basically about passive-aggressive communication in the workplace.
Yeah.
And people can just imagine what you would say, but that's it.
So we should do another one of these book talks. Is there a good book that you have in mind that we should do? I think we should do like something. Because what was the last one that we did? Oh, the Bologna one. A book by a woman.
Yes. Well, it doesn't come out until April, but Virginia Despentes' Apocalypse Baby, which I'm reading the galley of now, and it is amazing. And we should read.
That's the Feminist Press book, right?
Yes.
I haven't gotten to the page yet.
Yep.
Feminist Press, if you're listening, can you send me a copy of this? I'll email them.
I can email them and have them send you one. Sure.
That'd be great.
Yep. Done. She's coming to the bookstore in April, so.
That'd be really cool. That's perfect then. Let's do that.
But maybe we should find something beforehand, or we just...
Oh, I guess that's... I mean, we could talk about it before it comes out, I suppose.
Sure.
There's also, on a related note to this, we can have in May, I'll get them to send you a galley of this, talk with Anne Morgan about that book, The World Between Two Covers, where she read a book from every country in the world.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if that's actually possible, but okay.
196. Well, though I remember I followed this for years because she contacted me when it started, and it was going to be to read them all in 1 year. And there's certain countries that, because there's 196 recognized ones, and I think Kurdistan is the additional one that she read from. I don't have it here in front of me, so I can't look. But anyways, there's certain things that she had to have people translate something for her to be able to read so that she could cross that country off. And it didn't take her a year. It took more than a year. But the book isn't actually like, the book looks like it's much more about like production and interesting things about international literature. So it'd be perfect for the podcast people.
Cool.
Listeners is the word.
Excellent.
Listeners. Yes. All right. I think that'll do it.
Cool.
Okay. Well, I will talk to you guys later then.
Thanks.
Yes. Thank you, Patrick, for being on. And
thanks for inviting me.
We'll see you on Twitter. Absolutely.
And everyone can hear the outro of some more Fall Out Boy just to make your ears bleed.
Right. Now would be the time to yank your headphones out of your ear and throw them on the can.
Yeah. And then punch yourself repeatedly so that you can imitate what it feels like to be listening to this awful song. And we might, Tom, speaking of that, we might record our music podcast next week while you're gone. So we'll work that one in too. So we'll have things going on.
All right.
Okay. I'll talk to you guys later. Come on down for the Gimme That Big Pig Yahoo Fest to 1997.